What's going on, guys? Welcome to the 37th Xamarin Answer tutorial. So this video is going to be a direct continuation of the previous video, okay? And I say that because if you're just dropping in, be sure to go back one video and check that one out, because that's where we do a lot of the configuration to integrate G+ with our app, okay? So we are now at the point to where we have a sign in button, okay, that does nothing. So we've done the configuration, we've implemented all the stuff inside of the API console, and we've done some stuff with our manifest, we've done some stuff with the project, we got our SHA-1 fingerprint, and everything has been set up, and now all we need to do now is code, because this obviously does nothing, okay? So once this is done, the goal is then to have this sign in using the the user's G+ account, and then from there we can get stuff like their username, their ID, and to integrate with our app, whether it be a game or a social app or whatever you guys are planning. This way we can then sign in, okay? So that being said, without any further ado, let's get this party started, okay? So we have pretty much a blank app. So there's nothing that's really done, just pretty much coming to here. We just have the Google button that you saw, which doesn't do anything here, okay? So in order to get that going, the first thing that we need to do is we need to bring it in, okay? And it's not a normal sign, it's not a normal button like it is in Android. So it actually has its own class, okay? And we'll call it Google Sign In, okay? So let's go ahead and import that. Now the sign in button is going to be this button, in fact, right here, okay? So before we forget, let's go ahead and grab a reference of that from the designer, okay? Using a find view by ID, we will then cast it to a sign in button type, and then the ID of it inside of the XML file is sign in button, okay? So now we have a reference to that, okay? And it's, as you probably know now, it's pretty simple to subscribe to the click event using Xamarin. And this method is going to fire when we see fire click event. Sounds better. So this is what's going to happen when the user clicks in, okay? So we have that going, all right? But before we do that, before we do any of that, we have to do some other stuff, guys. So what we need to do now is we need to actually implement a Google API client, okay? So we have it's an interface of a Google API client, and what we need to do is we need to use a builder to build one, okay? So this is a really imperative part to the process of getting linked up to the G+ integration, okay? So we want to use something that's called a Google API client builder, okay? And it needs a context, so we'll just pass it this. That will suffice. Okay, so now we have that. Now that we have this builder, we can now add some. Now we can now configure some of its properties inside of it using some methods. And with that, now what we can do is then we can build it, and then that will build a Google API client. Okay, and the client is really a really important part, because that's what makes the connection from our app to the G+ servers. Okay, so this is really important part. So building it is really important. Okay, so what we need to do is first we need to add a connection callback, okay? So this is going to be some methods that are called when the connection is done, when it's suspended, or when it, and then we'll have another one for failed, okay? So you'll see what I mean by this, okay? So the add connection callback, and I pass it this, okay? So an instance of this is, of course, the activity, and it's saying it's giving us an error because this is not you can see right here, guys, if we back up a few, we can look that it says I Google API client connection callback. So it needs a listener. Okay, so and if I pass it this, that's not going to work, because obviously this isn't of type I Google connection callback listener. So the simplest thing to do would be to just implement that right here. Okay, so I Google API client connection callbacks. Okay, so now that this is now of type, it implements I Google API client. So it is of type that, so then passing in this will suffice, okay? So now what we need to do, we need to now implement some of its methods. We need to implement it. Okay, so we right click right here and we do implement interface. Okay, and notice down here it adds two methods. Okay, on connected and on connection suspended. So when the app connects, and if it connects successfully, this method will be called automatically. Okay, so we don't have to call this directly. We don't have to call this explicitly. It will be called automatically when the client connects. And then this, of course, will happen when it's suspended. All right, so that's what this is. This is registering this activity and saying, hey, this activity, which is of type this as well, and implements it, will listen. And when you need to do a connection on connected, or when on connection suspended, if these two events happen, go ahead and call the methods inside of this activity and we'll take care of the rest. So that's basically what we're saying right here. Okay, now let's wire up another event, which is going to be on connection, an on connection failed listener. Okay, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Okay, so Google API client on connection failed listener, and we're going to pass it this. We'll get an error because this does not implement that yet. So we'll take care of that by implementing it. Okay, right click, implement interface, and you see one method gets added to our activity, which is on connection failed. And you guessed it, what gets called? The on connection failed gets called when the connection fails. Okay, so if there's any reason why it cannot connect, this will get called and then we'll deal with it here. Okay, so this is exactly what it's saying. It said add a listener. The listener is this, call this method when the on connection is failed, and we'll take care of the rest. Okay, so that's what I'm doing that for. Now we'll do another method called add API. Okay, add API. What this does is it essentially adds the API that is going to be used. Okay, so. And we just making the builder aware of it, okay? The API client. So it needs one parameter of type API, okay? And the way we can do that is we do plus class, okay? Dot API, and it's a property instead of the plus class, okay? Right click, go ahead and import that. And just so you can see inside of this, you can kind of take a better look at it. This is the API that we'll be using is the property inside of plus class, okay? So just put that. Now we'll do another builder.add scope. And this is really important, guys, because of the fact that what this does is depending on the scope that we put, it matters because of the consent screen that the user will see. So the more scope that we need to see, the more permissions that are going to be needed to be accepted by the user. So what I mean by that is if you do scope plus login, and we can select profile, and then we do builder.add scope. So we want to do another scope. And this is okay, we can add another scope just by calling this method again. And we want to do scope plus login. Okay, so what this does is this one right here, what it says is, okay, we just want a few basic information from the user, okay? And then this one does, it says, okay, plus profile, we want a few more things, and we want to look at a little more information from the user, and that will directly show up in the consent screen, okay? So if we didn't have this, the user will not have to accept to as much. It'll just have something basic, like this application will only want some basic information from you. Whereas if you put this, it'll have some basic information plus some other stuff. So there'll be more for the user to consent to, okay? So this basically just gives us more information to look at, but the user has to accept that, of course, first, okay? And make sure it's in that order, because for me, I'm not sure if it was just me, but if I had it in the other order, it wasn't working for me. So I had to ask for profile, then login. Okay, so just a little disclaimer there. And the last one is going to be where we actually build it, okay? So here's where we actually build it, and it's going to send back a type of Google API client. So we'll do builder.build, and notice the build method sends back Google API client. which is what this is. So that works out perfectly, right? Okay. Said build our Google API client. Okay. So now that we have that, we are all good to go. So if you ever want to make any kind of configurations to this, guys, just make sure you go ahead and change it here, okay? Change anything here, like add some more scope or just anything different. Do that here, and basically it'll change it, okay? So be careful, but if you ever do want to make any kind of changes to the API client, just do it here in the builder, okay? All right, so now that that's done, let's come into let's go up to the top, and we're going to add some global variables, okay? Which we're going to use here shortly. And a few of them are going to be some bools, okay? So let's make 3 bools. And one's going to be intent in progress. So this is going to be true when an intent is in progress. And then here is sign in clicked. This is going to be true when the user clicked the sign in button. And then info populated is going to be another bool when the info has been populated already, so it's no longer needed to repopulate it again, okay? And these are all values that I've kind of, especially this one, like, you know, that I've just added just really quick in a flag. But I mean, this is going to be something that's just going to show you how to really get it going, and then hopefully you guys can just take it from there and start expanding on it, okay? So this isn't going to be anywhere near like pretty or anything like that, you know. I mean, it's not going to be a full-blown application. This is kind of more getting it set up, because that's probably going to be the hard part. Hopefully I can help you guys take care of that and then move on from there, okay? So those are our 3 bowls that we're going to use, and then we're going to need to have a global variable called connection, or of type connection result, and we'll name it mConnection result. And that's going to be a connection result when the connection has been made, okay? So has it failed? It's going to have some information in it that we can then take from, like if it's failed, if it's, you know, just any kind of information that we can use once the connection has been made, and whether it failed, whether it succeeded, and just the result of it, okay? So pretty helpful there as well. So now that we have some global variables, let's go into our Google sign in click. And remember, this method is going to be fired when the user clicks the sign in button, okay? So let's go in here. And there's actually not too much to do here, because we're going to have another method that takes care of most of it for us. And we'll do if not connecting. So through the Google API client, so if it's not connecting, then the sign in clicked, of course, equals true, because the user clicked the button, obviously. And then we'll call a method that we're going to create right now, resolve sign in error. Okay, guys? So that's going to take care of a lot of that for us, okay? But what this is basically saying is, if it's not already connecting, then connect, okay? Because if it is connecting, if it's in the midst of connecting, then we don't want to let the user just keep clicking, and it's going to keep making connections. So we only want them to connect if it's not already connecting, okay? So now let's go down here, and we will make our method called resolve sign in error, okay? Make sure that's right. Okay, so add that. Okay. So now the resolve sign in error is going to take care of bulk of the work for us, guys. So the first thing we want to check is to see if it is connected, okay? So if, and there's a property in here called is connected, okay? So if it's not connected, or I'm sorry, if it is connected, let's get rid of that exclamation mark. If it is connected, then no need to resolve errors, already connected. Okay, and then we'll return. However, if it's not already connected, we'll do some other stuff, okay? So we'll do if mConnection result, remember that's the connection result that we get back once it's tried to connect, has resolution. So if there is a resolution to it, then we need to come into here, and we need to set the intent in progress to true. And that's because we're actually going to start an intent right here, guys, okay? So start intent for result. Okay, and what this is going to do is start another intent with a result to be expected. Okay, so we'll do m connection result dot resolution dot intent sender. We'll pass it 0 here, null for the fill intent, and then 0, 0, 0 for the flags. Okay, so what this is going to do, guys, is this is going to bring up this is going to start an intent for a result. And what's going to happen is a lot of times if you have like a couple emails tied to your phone, it's going to pull it up and it's going to ask what Gmail you want to sign in with to the G Plus account that it's asking you to. Okay, and that'll sign in, and then what it'll do is it'll bring back and it'll say, okay, that this user has selected a Gmail and they want to sign in with this Gmail, not this one. Okay, so that's all that's doing there, and it's an intent, so it's actually going to send back a result which the user, what Gmail account the user has selected. Okay, so just to be a little more thorough, let's go ahead and put a try catch around that guy. And it's going to throw a send intent exception. Okay? If there is an exception. So it'll throw that. And I'll go ahead and copy and paste this over. So the intent was canceled before it was sent. Return to the default state and attempt to connect to get an updated connection result. So basically the user canceled. And that's basically what happened. So the intent is false because the intent is done. And now the Google API client is going to try to connect yet again. Okay? So this is going to kind of just be a buffer and resolve any kind of errors that may happen or occur. All right, guys? So we'll come back to this and I'll explain it a little more detail, but let's move on. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to override the activities on start method, and we want to call its base, but all we want to do here is we want to connect. So on start, we want to connect. Okay, so if the user starts up, we want to automatically attempt to connect to the G Plus account. Okay, now we'll do the same thing, but for on stop. And once again, we'll call its base method. So here we want to check to see if the Google client is connected. So if is connected, then disconnect, okay? Because if it's stopping, then we want to just disconnect from the Google API client. Okay? So those are just two simple methods that we override for the activity. Now let's come up here, guys, and we will override another method. And we're going to override the on activity for result. Okay? So in here, guys, this is important because remember we start an intent sender for result. So now when it comes back to this activity, this guy will be called automatically because now it has the result, hopefully, okay? And then this is what's going to be called when the result is done with some request codes and result codes. Okay, so this gets called and this comes back and says, okay, so I have some results for you. Now take care of them. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we can do if request code equals 0, okay, and if result code does not equal result okay, then m sign in clicked is false. Okay, so if it's not okay, then set this flag to false. And that's all that we're doing there. And we want to set the intent progress to false, of course, because if this is getting result back, then the intent in progress is obviously done. So we want to make sure that that's set to false. And we want to then check to see if it is connecting. Then to connect. Okay, so if it's not connecting, then connect. Okay, so once again, we want to just make sure that we don't connect while it's already connecting. So we'll come into here and it says, okay, activity result has been resolved. We have a result. then go ahead and then connect. Okay. So let's come over here to maybe come down. Let's do it right here. And let's make a, actually we'll come into here first, guys. And let's start implementing the onConnected. Okay, remember this onConnected is going to be called when the onConnected, when the client has connected. Okay, so a lot of the bulk of the work is going to be done inside of that class. Okay, now actually before we go, because the law of the bulk work is going to be done in that class, before we go on, let's do some of the more simple methods like onConnection failed. Okay, so if it has failed, okay, and there is no intent in progress, then we want to store the connection result. There you go. So hope that comment helps out a bit. So this is where the connection result is actually given a value. Okay, so now remember this is called right away, the connect. Okay, so it's called to connect, and it's actually meant to fail the first time. So it'll actually fail and it'll come into here because the user hasn't had a chance to sign in, and it's going to connect right away even without clicking the button, because once the user has clicked in right away, then we don't want to have them sign in every time. But the first time they obviously haven't signed in yet. So it's going to fail right away. It's going to come into onConnection failed, and it's going to fail the first time, the very, very first time the user opens up this application. So we want to have a store result, okay? And if that doesn't make sense, I'll do my best to explain here in a second. So if the user has signed in, so if sign in click, which is the user has signed in. So the user has already clicked. And because we don't know if it's the first time or not, we wanted to check to see if the user actually was the one that signed in, or is this just the API calling on startup. Until the user is signed in, or they cancel. Okay, so we'll call our resolve sign in error method, and that's all there is to it for that. Okay, so what this is going to do, guys, is it's going to come into here the first time, and it's going to fail, and then it's going to have a connection result. Okay, so because there's a connection result, then it's basically that's just where it's going to stop. And then next time it's going to see, okay, the user has actually signed in. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come into here now, resolve errors, and do this stuff in here, call an intent, and all that good stuff. Okay, so if not though, it's basically just going to come in here and die, because, or if it is successful, then it's going to come into here and be onConnected. Okay, so it can get a little confusing, like what's going on, and like, but I mean, I'll do my best to explain and step through the code once we're finished, and that way we can get a good idea of like the flow of this program and what's really going on. Okay, if we're still having some trouble. Okay, so the onConnected method is when everything is successful. Okay, so successful login, hooray. Okay, so we want to set it to false, to sign in to false. And then we want to come into here, and what we want to do is we want to check to see. So we'll do the if plus class people API get current person, and we'll pass in the API client, which has all the information with it. And if that does not equal null, okay? So what this is doing, guys, is checking to see if this is, because this will return null if it can't find any kind of person, or if there is no, or if you don't have enough scope. Okay, so we want to first check before we actually start grabbing the user. We want to check to see if that is in fact not null, because we don't want to mess it up. Okay, we don't want this program to crash, so we wanted to check to see if it's not null first. And then here is where we'll actually get the current person, because if it comes into this condition, then we know it's not null. And we know there's actually an existing person. Okay, so it sends back an iPerson, a type of iPerson, so which we'll import here. And then what we can do is we can just do a write line right now just to make it simple. So here's the actual user that signed in. So this is the plus user. And what we'll do is display their display name. Okay? Which in my case should be the Xamarin player or something like that I have on my display name. So but it should be your display name for your G+ or whoever G+ is signing in, okay? Okay, so now that being said, it looks like we've got a lot of this done. So I don't see why we can't just go ahead and try to run this guy and see what's gonna happen. Okay, so let's see if we can go ahead and run it and make sure that we've got all the bugs worked out and we got it working. Okay, so all right, let's come into here. We'll let it do its thing. It's building right now, and what it should do first now is it should come into our on start for our activity and then immediately try to connect, okay? Which it should fail because of the fact that it shouldn't be able to connect because of the fact that the connection result is not, or the sign in the user hasn't signed in, okay? So let's see what's going to happen first. Bring that up. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is a good indication that it's working the way we expect it to. Okay, so what happened is, now let me go ahead and cancel this before I sign in. But what notice that they want the application is asking for the user's consent to user G+ and some of their, remember the scope that I was telling you about. Now this is the basic profile info, and then the other one, the actual like the login, but the other scope, the profile scope, is adding this thing right here. Okay, so if that wasn't here, if we didn't add that, this wouldn't be here. Okay, so the more scope we add, the more that the user has to consent to. Okay, so that's what I was talking about earlier in this tutorial. Now I canceled it because what I want to do is I want to close this out and I want you to see the flow of this. Okay, so we'll go ahead and set a breakpoint right here. We're going to set a breakpoint right here, right here, right here, right here. Okay, so that looks good. And this kind of helps me, guys. I mean, whenever I'm like, what's going on, like, you know, what's firing first, and I just want to get my head around the flow of it and what's really going on, I'll just start setting breakpoints everywhere and just kind of start stepping through the code and see what's going on. Okay, so our on start method is what's called, which actually obviously makes sense. Our on start was called first. Okay, so this is going to attempt to connect this connect. Okay, and this has already been created, so our on create is called first. Okay, so the Google API client has a instance already and it has been built. Now it comes into here and it attempts to connect. Okay, so let's continue on. Now when it attempted to connect, it failed. Okay, so there was an on connection failed. Okay, and that's because of the fact that it's trying to connect and it hasn't actually connected yet for the first time. Okay, so it's failed, which makes sense. And then it comes into here and it stores the connection result. Okay, and then it checks to see, well, has a user signed in? Did the user actually click on the button? Which we didn't, because we didn't even get a chance yet. So it's going to come into here and say, okay, never mind, I'm going to just go away. Okay, so then it just pauses. Then it's just like, okay, well, now I'm waiting. So now we go ahead and we click the button. Okay, and what this does is it pulls up the consent screen, which now I will go ahead and sign in and consent to it. So this was called over here, and the activity for result has been, now the on activity for result has been called. Okay, so when I signed in, that was the activity that was called, And when it came back, now it says, okay, now I have a result for you. Now go ahead and proceed, okay? So it comes in here just so we can see the result is okay. So it didn't fire that. The intent is done. And then it's not connecting. So now it's going to try to connect yet again. Okay? Now it comes into here on connected. And it sees that we have a person. And our person has been taken now. So it's got the current person from the Google API client, and it'll write out Xamarin Player, which is what I have on my G+, okay? So one thing I should have done was I should have put a breakpoint here on the click point where the user clicks in, and then it'll come into the resolve sign-in error since it didn't break right there. But basically this start intended for result is what brings up that screen that we consent to, okay? And that's what actually signs in, okay? So that's what that does. And then it never came into here because we didn't cancel it. And then once that was called, the on activity result was fired and then came into here, and that's where you saw it break right there, okay? So it broke right here, we stepped into it, and we saw what happened there, okay? So that's one thing that we didn't get into, but that's essentially what happens, and it came into here and it just started that intent, okay? So just want to make sure I'm pretty thorough on this because, like I said, it can get really weird, but that is how to sign in with the G+ account, okay? So now in the next video, it's going to be pretty short. Now that we have it all configured, I'm going to start playing around with over here in the on connected method and just show you how to get more information like the display name the relationship status and how to get people in your circles and stuff like that, okay? So that's going to be in the next tutorial. Since we already have it set up, it's going to be the next one where we're going to kind of dive into just now finally setting it up. Now, take a breather, just relieved of that, and then the next video we'll go ahead and look into the actual fun of it, so stay tuned for that, okay? So now if you guys haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. I'm gonna have a lot more videos coming out with stuff like this. So if you're interested in integration with G+ and just any kind of other Google Play services, make sure you get all the updates. And if you already subscribed, it's great. If you haven't, please do so. It really helps my channel grow. Other than that, thanks for watching, guys.